Okay, I'd like to call to order the May 18th Finance Committee meeting. Moved by Mr. Perkins and second by Mr. Forsyth. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Approved. Against? Okay, passed. Like a motion for the approval of the minutes of April 27th. Mr. Janisha, second by Mr. Forsyth. Any discussion? All those in favor, put your hand up, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Against? All
Aye.
passes. So our first report is a COVID-19 update. I believe we have Dana and Dr. Williams. Who would like to go first? No, now I got a selective volunteer. Dr. Williams, please.
All right. So good evening, everyone. I was just going to go over a kind of an overview of where things stand. Right now, we have 194 cases in the county. The trend is very favorable. For almost a week, we haven't had any new cases reported. And the week before that, we had an average of about 1 per day. St. Lawrence County still has many more than the surrounding counties. Jefferson County, which has the next highest number, is at 71, and they went up by 9 since our last meeting. As far as testing, we've actually done almost 6,000 tests in the county. The most recent update on the New York State website said that we've done 5,822 tests in the county. That's the combination of St. Lawrence Health System and Claxton Hepburn Medical Center. Fortunately, the New York State website is now updating itself accurately. So what you see on their COVID tracker website is accurately reflecting the testing that we're doing. The proportion of the patients who we've tested in the county are about 5.2% of the population, and the percentage positive is currently at 3.3%. One of the important statistics that's a little bit harder to see is the number of patients who've been hospitalized. And of our 194 people who've been diagnosed, 33 people have been hospitalized, which gives a percentage of 17% of people who've been diagnosed. The other new development, which people may be familiar with, is we are seeing in the national literature and also in New York State literature about a new COVID-associated disease entity, which is called pediatric multi-system inflammatory syndrome. Fortunately, there have been no cases in our county or in our region that we've been aware of or recognized, but it is something that you might see in the literature. Generally, this illness tends not to affect younger people, but this is an example of a manifestation of the pediatric population. As far as testing, we're continuing to primarily focus on the PCR testing. That again helps us identify an acute infection and also to screen for people who are asymptomatic but may be contagious. There is still a role for serologic testing, but it's mostly just, again, for epidemiology or prevalence studies. So there's much less of the serologic testing happening. Probably our biggest challenge in the county is that we're still only doing what I consider reference lab testing. So even though we are able to collect the samples from our patients, we still have to send them off to reference labs to do the actual processing and to get us the results of the tests. So that's where the delay of at least 1 day, but sometimes up to 3 or 4 days comes in. We are still working very hard to get the point of care or in-house testing, but because of a national shortage and distribution issues, that hasn't happened for any of the hospitals in the area. As people know, there was an executive order directed at the nursing homes, mandating that they need to do testing of their employees and staff, not just once, but actually 2 times per week. And so that's been a real challenge, and that's something that Dana and I have been working with the nursing homes to try and organize. New York State is now at least supplying the swabs and the transport media for the testing. there's still some lack of clarity as to whether they're going to run the test or pay for the test or help with some of the other logistics. As we start looking at testing, more people, especially with any kind of given frequency, we're really going to have to look at some innovative ways to do the testing. There's some information in the literature about doing something called pooled samples or batched samples, where you collect 10 specimens from 10 individuals with different swabs, but then you put the swabs together in one viral transport media and do one test with those 10 samples. The idea is if that whole batch is negative, then you can tell 10 people that they don't have it. And if one is positive, then you go back and you test all 10. But it's a way to more rapidly screen a larger group of people and to conserve supplies. It's something that people have been doing in other countries, and there's a lot of discussion about that, especially as hospitals look to test their staff and then to repeat the testing. And I should say that some of our local hospital systems have embarked on testing of their staff, again, really to help ensure the safety of their staff, but also of patients who are coming to the hospitals. And so far, the testing has been very favorable, and we have not identified asymptomatic hospital workers, at least at one of the hospital systems that's done this. And so that's a positive thing. The other thing we're going to need to look at is less invasive ways of collecting the samples. As people know, right now, the primary methodology is to take a swab and to put it not into the front of someone's nose, but into the back of their nose. And especially as we're looking at testing employees twice a week, we want to do this as non-invasively as possible. There's some information about doing testing either with an oral swab, a front of the nose swab, or also using saliva. And even though some of the initial products, there was some question about accuracy, some of the newer saliva tests look very promising, and they look to be more accurate. So those are things that we're looking at. The biggest thing that we're obviously moving into is reopening. And from a public health perspective, our job is to make sure that the reopening is done as safely as possible. As everyone knows, last week it was announced that the North Country region had met all 7 of the metrics or criteria that the governor laid out for reopening. And I should point out that testing capacity was the final measure that needed to be met, and it was met. Our county continues to lead the charge in terms of testing in the region. So now we have 5 regions that are in phase 1. As you know, there's a North Country control panel that is supposed to be monitoring the various metrics to make sure that the reopening goes safely. The timing of advancing from phase 1 to the next phase and so on is still not entirely clear, but if we understand things correctly, it's supposed to be a 14-day period. The governor may or may not choose to shorten that period. The reason for 14 days is the nature of transmission of this illness is that it takes a little while to determine whether the reopening has actually created more cases or not. We won't really know whether we've created more cases until at least a week, and probably really until 14 days we'll have a better idea if there have been an increase, spike in cases that people are concerned about. There will be measurements to determine whether the reopening is safe and not causing an increased problem. And I think daily infection rate is going to be one of the important metrics, as well as daily hospitalization rate. But again, both of those measurements have a lag of at least 7 days and possibly up to 14 days. The other metrics, the other 5 metrics are still going to be monitored, but I think things like testing capacity is unlikely to decrease. It's probably going to increase. And I also think that Dana and her team have done a great job of making sure that we have the tracers in place and the hospital continue to work to continue their capacity. So just to kind of summarize, we've had no documented new cases in nearly a week, and that's despite a significant increase in testing, including testing of employees, both in our nursing homes and in some of our hospital environments and community health center. The region's entered phase 1. We're not really going to know the impacts of entering phase 1 for a week or two. Given the high number of people who are asymptomatic with this illness, yet contagious, we really need to focus on the testing that's been discussed and really testing asymptomatic individuals, especially those who are working in the healthcare environment, or really anyone now who's got a position that allows for them to be in contact with the public. It's very important that people realize that the measures that are associated with a pause order are still in place. So even though we're able to do industry that's associated with phase 1, the recommendations about social distancing, the recommendations about masks, those are all still in place. And I think it's very exciting that we're kind of restarting important parts of the economy. But I just want to emphasize this: it needs to be done in a controlled, measured fashion to avoid negating the considerable progress that we've made as a community, which, as we all know, came at considerable sacrifices to people, who had to close up their shops and so on. And just a reminder that really, until there's a vaccine or effective treatment, we still need to emphasize prevention, detection, and containment. And the ongoing focus of public health is going to be building our testing capacity, determining thresholds when we're going to intensify our public health responses, and work with the tracers and, identifying any new spikes and really working to contain that. And certainly from a testing perspective, I think being able to have in-house testing or point of care testing are going to be real game changers. And both the hospital systems are working desperately to make this happen sooner rather than later. So that's my summary for tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Does anyone have any questions for Dr. Williams at this time? Seeing none, Dr. McGuire. Dana?
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Dr. Williams, for that summary. I just have a few slides that's going to just kind of go over some of the things that Dr. Williams talked about. So let me see if I can do this. And can you guys see this?
Not yet, but it's coming.
Okay.
Yes, we do now. Yes.
Okay. So this just goes over, since the first case, you can really see where we had an increase, and you can see for the past 7 days, we have not had a positive case. And so that just nicely shows that. And then we have made this dashboard, and so we will put this out on a weekly basis. This will just kind of keep up with what's going on in the county. And because we've been in this response for so long now, we're going to do the cases by week. And so you can still see the decrease. And then the graph just under the cases is the testing. So that just shows for the past month, you can see how many tests per day are being done at mainly the 2 hospital systems, but there are some being done at Clifton Fine. And so you can see that we really reach the 150 mark most often, which is really what we need to maintain to keep the metrics. And then to the right side, I just have to move my little screen thing here. We show how many people have went through the isolation and the quarantine process. So that big piece of the pie is those that we've closed out. So there's been over 1,000 people who have went through the process. And then for active isolation, so those who are positive, who are in isolation, we have just 21. And then the rest of those are people who are in quarantine right now. And those are people who have had a contact to a positive. So I just wanted to go over that. So we're going to do that just on a weekly basis. And then the backside to this resource really is to help people with the reopening. So there's just many resources on just getting to the New York website on what your plan should look like. It does provide health information, but also information just from like the business side of things. So we put that there. All of the guidance that you need for the cleaning, for mask wearing, the dashboard. So this is just a quick place that you can use this resource and then just get to those links. So that is coming out. And so if you haven't seen it yet, stay tuned for it. Then I just wanted to go over again for the testing that we have here in the county. Our numbers have increased since this morning. So we're now over 6,000 tests. And so we believe that all of the tests that we've done here in the county now are counted in the state system. So you can see that here. So if you go to the website, you can see we're still 2 cases off by what the state says that we have. I'm not sure why that is. We've had a few cases that were not part of our county, or they were part of our county, and sometimes a transfer to that other county does need to occur. And then this week, we've been doing a lot of work on the reopening, and we've been doing a lot of calls about who can open, what they need to do. So I just wanted to point out to you that the website has a great tool. You can see down at the bottom of this slide. So you can click on that tool, and it asks you to put in what category you're in for a business. And so you can look up. And so I had a call about just a gun club. And so I put this in here, and I took the code and I put it into the tool, and this is what it came out. So that's currently closed because it's considered to be a recreational activity. So that's a tool right on the website. No, not right now. And this is what I had already went over. So those are the slides, so I can stop sharing. So those are the activities that we've been working on. Like Dr. Williams said, we're working hard with the nursing homes to make sure that they can do their testing. We're also going to meet with the colleges in the morning on their plans to kind of reopen for the fall. And then we do have a meeting scheduled with the superintendents on the 2nd of June about graduation. So those are the types of things that we've both been working on. And that's all we have at this time.
Thank you. Any questions for Dana? Mr. Forsyth.
Thank you, Dana. You said 1,152 have done the isolation. Is there a firm number? How many of those have been tested? Or do we have any idea?
I don't. So at the beginning, we weren't recommending everyone based on how the priorities have changed. We now recommend anyone who has had contact with a positive to get tested. Sometimes we help and make that phone call for them. Sometimes people do it themselves, but we have no way of knowing until the test results come back. So we have never really monitored. We said go for the test, then watched for the results and made sure that they were someone who was in quarantine. So we don't have that. But I just wanted to make sure that you knew that right now the people that is just over 1,000 is isolation and quarantine.
Okay.
We've had 194 people go through isolation, but it's over 1,000 people that we have monitored.
Okay, and just to follow up quick,
Certainly.
the nursing homes have to check their employees twice a week. Does that count towards the total of testing in the county, or is that excluded from the total, or how's that work?
That counts in our total, yes.
Okay, all right, good, thank you.
Yep.
Mrs. Gardner or Mrs. Hager, what are you going by?
Please turn this on.
You're muted for one thing. Right now you're going by Ann.
You can call me Margaret, Kevin.
Okay.
Dr. McGuire, that chart, the second chart showed, you said something about 150. Is that we have to have 150 tests a day?
Well, so the requirement with the metrics is to do 30 tests for every 1,000 people. Do I have that right, Dr. Williams?
It's also about capacity. So even though they look at how many tests you're doing, but the real question is if you have the capacity to do it.
And so I think we have to do, but is it 3 tests or 30 tests per 1,000? I'm getting that.
It's
mixed up.
30 tests per 1,000 people.
Okay. So when you look at our population, it's about 150.
Okay. And the thing you showed about the gun club, and that's available through your website or the state?
That's on the newyorkforward.gov website.
Okay, that's a great thing you showed, because I don't think any of us, well, I'll speak for myself, I certainly don't know what to tell people when they ask. So that's a wonderful resource you showed us. Thank you.
Yes, and it uses the North American Industry Classifications system. So you have to put in your code, and that's why you go to the census.gov to get that code.
Thank you very much.
Oh, please.
And anyone else? So those that have been quarantined, would they still reach out for testing? Would they contact their primary provider, Dr. Williams or Dr. McGuire?
So
They would, oh, go ahead, Dan.
I was going to say, if they want the PCR test, and so we monitor people on a daily basis, so we can recommend that as it goes to. So sometimes we kind of recommend that testing when they first go into quarantine. But if we're talking to them and there's been a change of status, we can recommend that. And so we give the phone number for the testing center.
And one point I'll just make there is, because the nature of the illness, a lot of times people are going into quarantine within 24 or 48 hours of being identified as being a close contact. And if they get tested immediately, the chance of having a falsely negative test may be higher. So for some people, it may be helpful maybe to get tested right when they go into quarantine, but then certainly should they develop any symptoms, but even as they're, on day 7 of quarantine, being tested if that's appropriate in terms of their quarantine.
So the protocol right now then is, if you have symptoms or you think that you've been exposed, you still need to go through your primary provider. I mean, it's not the general, you don't want the general public signing up, correct?
Well, so if you're in that category, you should always call your primary care provider, but you should actually call the testing center, the hotline for Claxton, their respiratory clinic, and the hotline for the St. Lawrence Health System to arrange the testing to happen. The primary care providers can facilitate, but I would encourage people just to call those 2 hotline numbers.
Good. Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Arquette.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Williams, you just used the term falsely negative result. I understand in Lewis County, I believe it was, that 4 nursing home workers were tested positive. Each one of them were asymptomatic. And I believe that the results have come into question. Is that true? And if so, is that a problem that we've had at all here in St. Lawrence County?
So generally the sense is that the risk of a false negative test, so in other words, you have the illness, but the test comes back negative, the risk of that is greater than the risk of a false positive, which I think they might be referring to. So if your test is positive, you have the disease almost all the time, as opposed to a negative test where we definitely see that the false negative rate is variably reported somewhere between 15 and 25% of the time. The false positive rate is much, much less.
Thank you, Dr. Williams.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Okay, well, Dr. Williams and Dr. McGuire, thank you very much for leading this effort. We really appreciate it. Okay, our next is our presentation. We have for tourism in St. Lawrence County, we have Brooke Rouse, Chamber of Commerce. Is Brooke with us?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, Brooke.
I'm going to share my screen. Can see my screen all right?
Not yet. Okay, yep, we're good to go.
Got it. All right. Well, I just want to start by saying thank you to the leadership of St. Lawrence County, Dr. McGuire and Dr. Williams, and you, the board, and Ruth and the entire team. I think that the work and transparency and communication during this pandemic has given the business community a level of security within the chaos. So I just want to thank all of you for the work that you're doing on that. And I've recently been included in the reopening task force. We've just connected a couple of times, but I think it's extremely valuable to have us working very closely so that we understand what the situation is at least weekly, if not more, and we can advise accordingly and try to pivot and direct people in the right way. So I just want to thank you on that. I'll be kind of incorporating the pandemic into my presentation on tourism. And then certainly if you have any other questions about what we're doing to support businesses during this time, please feel free to ask. So I'll try to cruise through this a little bit. So I just wanted to present Tourism Economics puts together a study by region every few years. So this is 2018 statistics, but just a quick overview. We've seen that traveler spend has steadily increased in St. Lawrence County over the last 5 years. This shows back to 2016. It also nicely exhibits that the tourism industry is not just hotels. It is a number of different sectors in the industry. And I think it's important to think about that as we consider tourism as a strong piece of our economy. So lodging, recreation, food and beverage, retail and service, transportation, and second homes are also included in that. This is just some tax information from, again, from Tourism Economics, the 2018 report. So the summary of this is that
Brooke, we don't have your slide. It's not showing up. Just a minute. Okay.
That's the same one, right?
it's different.
No, that's different. Yep. Okay.
Sorry, it looks very similar. It's all right. So this just shows it, were it not for tourism generated state and local tax, the average household in the county would have to pay approximately $379 to maintain the same level of government revenue. And also points out that, again, in 2018, tourism jobs accounted for 1,689 positions in the county. So it is big business when you put together all of the businesses that are included in the sector. Just wanted to review the budget. This is the budget that was presented in Budget Committee in August. And just to quickly go through this, and I sent you, I think it's in your Google Drive, the detailed budget, but feel free to ask any questions about this too. So we have restricted funds and unrestricted funds. The restricted funds include the funds we receive from you that match the New York State matching funds. Those go into a restricted account and can only be spent on specific things. All of that is documented and reported and approved by the state on a quarterly basis. And then we often have various grant programs going on which are restricted, at least in portion, to their use. So I just included the NYPA power proceeds allocation that we have. It's the number, it's a 3-year grant, so the number fluctuates a bit. Given the fact that that was to focus on tourism events specifically, I decreased that amount a little bit this year because we will likely have less being spent and therefore reimbursed in percentage for this year. And I'll get into that a little bit more. Then we have the unrestricted. So that's the remainder of your allocation, as well as I just include the tourism marketing fee as part of our enhanced listing as part of our membership. So between the unrestricted and the restricted, our total tourism budget is $352,841. That does not include some of the additional grants that we're involved in partnership with others as the primary administrator of the grant. Just to quickly go over the expenses, we contribute to both the Thousand Island Seaway and the Adirondack regions to leverage our brand against theirs and our destination with their brand. And so there are a number of regional projects that are really beneficial. Our top referral of website is the Adirondack website, for example. We spend a good chunk, about half of that restricted money, on advertising, both digital and print. Collateral, those are our guides, things like that. Distribution is our kind of everyday mailing, as well as the contracts that we have along the highway rest stops and things like that. And then the website development and maintenance, and those include contracts with web folks, as well as any fees associated with maintaining those sites. Promotional travel goes along with trade shows and things like that. And then the tourism events include the NYPA power proceeds allocation covering one employee that's focused on tourism events. This is a little bit tiny, sorry about that. It didn't pull in here very well. So again, this is the unrestricted expense, the administration that covers the equivalent of 1.5 full-time equivalent employees, a percentage of our visitor center costs, advertising and promotion that can't be covered by the matching funds program, trade show displays, other advertising and collateral, again, that's not included in the matching funds program. And then here, a large chunk of our unrestricted budget goes towards the match required for a number of grants. So for example, the Market New York grant that we have, power proceeds, and we're part of a high water recovery grant for the Seaway region as well. So that's a large chunk of the unrestricted that goes to leverage additional funds for the county. And tourism development activities, I'm just checking with that. And that includes association membership fees and travel and conference training, things like that. So that's our budget, and we have just wanted to mention a couple of ways that we're leveraging the tourism funds. With the increased allocation from the county, it's allowed us to increase our staffing and also increase the money available to participate and really leverage a number of grants. So I think that I was thinking I'll try to do a calculation of that for all of you. So the matching funds is an annual program, as I mentioned. The Adirondack and Thousand Islands region are annual as well. Market New York is a 2020-2021 project. The power proceeds allocation. And then we've been a partner in a number of tourism related grant opportunities, such as one that Tawny had with the Arts Council to promote barn quilt trails, where we did a pilot bus tour and things like that, and improved the web presence of that. We've also worked with Cornell Cooperative on their local food program, emphasizing farm to table, and they were able to collect a lot of photos that they gave us rights to help promote the farm to table movement and the agriculture in St. Lawrence County. Those are just a couple of other examples. Just some pictures to show the diversity of what we're looking at. It's a large county, and there's a lot going on between culture and heritage and recreation, and our kind of built assets like Singer Castle and the Remington that we try to thematically promote the entire county. So what have we been doing during the pandemic? We certainly haven't been sitting with our feet up. We've activated in helping businesses, but from a tourism perspective, this is kind of how we've looked at it. We recognize that the doors and even the borders were shut to visitors, but we've taken the opportunity to really encourage our local people to get out and get familiar with what the county has to offer. Any strong destination is going to have a local population that serves as ambassadors, and it's something we've always tried to do, but we've seen now that people have more time to do things and they're here, that they've been getting out on the trails. For example, we've seen 110% increase in use of our trails site in March, April of this year. So by getting our local people out to understand what we have, they can better share that and when people are here or digitally right now. They're also generating original content, which is invaluable. We have the ability for people to post their own photos on that site and on social media. And so we're developing this full library of images that we'll be able to use indefinitely. So there's a huge value to that. We are promoting now mostly to locals, but kind of teasing for the future, solo and family experiences. We recognize, and I'll get into that a little bit more, that's going to be the way of travel for a little while. And so we're focusing on those experiences through our social media to suggest that and let people know that we do have those experiences. We've been spending a lot of time. We launched at the end of December the new visit stlc.com site. Hopefully you had a chance. So this has been a good opportunity first quarter to really focus on continuing to develop content and really developing the layout of that site. It launched again the end of December. And so we've put a lot of time into that and continue to every day. With the website, we myself and Johnny Clay is on our team, do a lot of updates to the website. And then we work with 2 web developers as well to help with formatting and coding and things like that are beyond our scope. We've been promoting virtual experiences. We've been sending out a monthly calendar. I have a little snip on the right of some virtual experiences that are upcoming. And that goes out to both the local tourism partners as well as visitors on our email list. And so that again lets them experience what we have to offer at home, wherever they are, and hopefully get them dreaming about coming here when the time is right. We've also been very focused on developing some new opportunities that we'll be able to launch again when the time is right. These things have been kind of in the works and on the radar, but we've been able to spend more time on them during this time. And so we're working on a Trails Challenge, the Great 8 Trails Challenge, which would include a number of different experiences throughout the county that would earn you a patch and be integrated with our Trails site. We're also looking at, last year, you may remember we did a cycling event. We're looking at pivoting from that to working with a local tour company who would offer private tours instead of focusing on cycling events. So that might be another opportunity that might be more fitting for how things move forward with tourism and our visitors. We've also had a lot of requests for materials, and we continue to send those out. ATV maps we've been sending out very frequently in the last couple weeks, and so we do serve as distribution for that sort of thing. Deb delivers, and we send out, and we have places on our site where people can request those. Also a lot of fishing interest as well. We're also supporting the businesses who make up the destination. That's been a huge focus of ours. We quickly activated in partnership with the IDA and the Small Business Development Center, as well as Cornell Cooperative, to make sure that we're trying to touch as many businesses as we can and mostly let them know that we're here and they're not alone. It's been an incredible situation to navigate for them. And so together in this partnership of business development folks. We've really just been trying to work together to take little pieces and share that information with as many businesses as possible. I'm in touch with Patrick at the IDA pretty much daily, as well as the SBDC, and we kind of divide and conquer to try to help as many people and share as many resources as possible. But from a tourism perspective, it's very important, just as it is to a community, that when it's time, that we have our restaurants here, and that we have our retail shops here, and that we have our nonprofits who add a lot of art and culture to the destination. So to us as community members, they're community assets, and that's really the beauty of tourism. But for tourism, they're critical to the destination. So that work is important. We're also trying to be creative with some of the economic development partners about thinking about this as an opportunity to welcome home those who might no longer be interested in city life. Perhaps some people are realizing that living in the North Country may be an attractive opportunity. And I know Mary Jean Remington from ATL was on a call this morning, a roundtable with Elise Stefanik, and she mentioned that she's actually had people reach out to come back and work for her. So this is an opportunity for us, and we have a couple committees working together on a potential strategic marketing plan to those areas, reaching them and making sure they know if they want to come back to work or buy a second home or a first home or start a business, that we are ready to handhold them through the process. So if you have anybody else that you're talking to who might be interested in this, connect them with me or Patrick or anyone who might fit their industry, and look out for that campaign to come. We're also working very closely across the region and the state. We're constant calls across the region, the Adirondack and the Thousand Islands region. We're all experiencing this a little bit differently, but can certainly learn from each other. And as well as I'm on a state call every week to see what's happening across the state and how people are both being creative, but also managing and dealing with things as this goes through. And then finding creative solutions, that's the key, trying to figure out what we can do that's safe and responsible, that can also continue to at least get some money flowing in the economy and set us up, put us in a position that makes us stronger as a destination and as a business and as an organization going forward when it's time. Just have a couple more. I have a few more. Sorry, it's always longer than I think. I'll try to zip through. So just I kind of mentioned that future travel looks like solo and family trips, driving versus flying, domestic versus international. Fortunately, that's kind of our thing. That's what we promote normally. So we just need to make that messaging even more clear. These are just some graphics we use to show where we're located. Again, the drive market will be valuable. The Canadian market's very important to us, so that's certainly a tricky piece of this. We manage 3 websites. STLC, Visit STLC, this is the one that just got relaunched. Get about 68,000 visits per year. On all of these slides showing the analytics, just for those who aren't as aware, organic search is just people Googling whatever and coming across our site. Direct would be a direct type in of our URL. So that's a good sign that they've seen our advertisement, for example, and plugged it in. And then social is obvious. Referral can come from digital ads, or content placements, things like that. So again, increase in that. Fishcap.net also, we redid this last year. It's really focused on tournaments, 11,000 visits per year. The new visitors are really important too. That shows that we're getting new eyes on the sites. We've had increase there in use. And then STLC Trails launched September a year ago. We've got about 9,000 visits a year These stats in the middle show last year to this year, this time. So that's where that huge increase is, the first quarter of usage. So Bass Elite, been in touch with Bill and Janet, especially a lot over the last couple of years, and just wanted to give you an update on this. So we've been in contact with a lot of event people throughout the county on what their status is and trying to help them navigate that. With Bass, we had another call Friday with the Bassmaster representative and did some really good, again, creative brainstorming. And what we're looking at now, this isn't set in stone, but potentially what we're looking at doing is having the first 2 days, Thursday and Friday, coordinate with local restaurants to have watch parties at their sites under their own parameters. So we would work with them on that. And then Saturday and Sunday, we would look at doing for the weigh-in a limited amount of time at the park and just have it be a drive-in opportunity so that we can control the crowds, we can control the movement of people. And then they're looking at doing an expo within the Civic Center that, again, would be really controlled as far as the amount of people and how people are moving through there. So that is kind of what we're looking at right now. That being said, we've adjusted the budget a bit to reflect that. The festival would be a much lesser cost. There still would be some needs. It's not really a festival, it's just having people there. Bassmaster still has their host fee and expenses. Some marketing, again, it would really be more for local or drive market. If what they're talking about now is potentially allowing within the North Country region and trying to encourage people within the North Country region to move around more so than outside of the North Country and outside of the country. So a little bit of marketing there, and entertainment would just include like fireworks and a concert to go with the weigh-in. So the revenue is a little tricky this year. Private sponsors, we're anticipating that to be next to nothing. The festival won't have vendors, or it may have just a couple. So that revenue is gone. It also has the parking fees would be gone as well, other than they did say we could charge for the folks to park for the weigh-in. And then the request to the county, as I talked to Bill today, would be $50,000, and have applied for the RVRDA again for $20,000. And the balance from last year is approximately $26,800. So that would put us at a net of $16,500 based on what we know today, which is not everything. Bill updated that he's been in touch with emergency services. If we went with this format, the permitting would not be required at that level. There would still be some permitting with Department of Health, but it wouldn't be as extreme because it wouldn't be over 5,000 people. And so they're kind of waiting to see if there's more guidance from the state on what's going to be permitted and what's going to be needed. So that is that. Thank you again for your support. You know, we really think of tourism as an investment in the economy, both now and into the future. And we thank you for your continued support there, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Brooke. I'm waiting for the slide to disappear so I can see who has any questions.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Forsyth.
Thank you. Thank you, Brooke. I wish I'd had a little chance to see more of this earlier, but that's good. I got to start on what I want to. Membership dues. Where would I find that in the budget?
Yeah. So I didn't include the full tourism budget. If you're interested in seeing that, I can do that. I always divide out for the county the tourism budget, and the chamber budget is separate. It's within the same P&L, so I'm happy to share the full year-to-date P&L with all of you, but it's not on that tourism budget.
So it's not really broken. The other thing is under your unrestricted, under your budget, your unrestricted total is 182, 175, but based on the numbers, it should only be 172, 175. It's 10,000 off for some reason. I'm not sure what that is.
Thank you. That was an Excel glitch.
Okay. The 11,000 new visitors. Is it all right if I got a few questions, Kevin? So I'm just going to
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Yep.
Okay. The 11,000 new visitors. What is the highest search? Where are they headed?
So the 11,000, let me just pull up which site. Was that for the trails site? Yeah, the 11,000 visits was the annual visits for fishcap.net. I can't remember exactly what pages on there. The site is mostly based on the events, and then there are resources by species. You can search by species and water body. So I don't have that. I can certainly follow up if you're interested.
Okay, so but this is basically just for fishing then.
That 11,000 is.
Okay.
So I can provide you with a little bit more information on those analytics. In general, the fishing, just an add-on, we do major advertising in the fishing guides in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, and sometimes Vermont. And so we get a lot of visitation to this site based on those advertisements. For this time of year, what we've been seeing on the trails site, for example, a lot of interest in the ATV trails. Clearly, they just opened. So the last couple weeks, there's been a lot of interest in that. And we've been working with Deb to add even more detail to this site on ATV, and people can search by that experience. So that is very popular there. The waterfall hikes are also very popular on the trails site. And on the visit site, I'm trying to think what the top. The visit site recently has had a lot of interest in, we created a takeout site and a COVID site and a curbside site. So there's been a lot of more local interest in and traffic there. Trying to think, ATV also comes through there. We've got a whole page dedicated to that, and information on the homepage as well. So it does run a bit seasonally. There's some hiking and fishing also that we get through the visit site, and we will refer to our other pages too. We have basic information on visit, and then we refer to the other sites for more specific messaging.
If I can follow up, under the tourism events, the 40,000 one-time salary and benefits, travel, research, that's for one employee. What's the focus of that one employee, especially this year? What's the task of that employee?
Sure. So we're looking at that right now. Within our application to Power Proceeds, the intent of that position is to look at working with event organizers to better market their events. If they need any help with whatever they need help with, Johnny's able to connect them with the correct resources and kind of navigate them through whatever is necessary. And then she is keeping very close contact with those organizers to get information updated, make sure that they're doing social media, and they've provided the information for us keep our site updated. She's also working very closely with I Love New York to make sure that our attractions and events are updated there. So we're getting more views there, which is extremely valuable. She's also connecting with the tourism partners to make sure that they know what kind of events are going on. That was something in the past restaurants would say, I didn't even know whatever was happening. I would have had more staff or more whatever ready. So she's doing a lot of one-on-one, especially now, she's been doing a lot of one-on-one communication with various partners to see how they're doing, make sure they know about the resources, get a feel for how they're feeling about things moving forward, so that we can best support and plan for that. So she's also, she helps with all kinds of marketing stuff with social media and
Okay.
website updates and things like that.
And just two last ones. The last month we voted to extend the 42,000 from the bed tax, the additional funds. Is that included in this budget here? Or is that
Yes.
separate? It is,
No.
it's part of that, probably the St. Lawrence County allocation then?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and we
Mhm.
we really consider that as part of the funds that we're able to use to match different,
Okay.
leverage that money
To
through
draw
grant
it in.
programs.
Okay, I got
Yep.
that. And the Bassmasters tournament.
Mhm.
Ogdensburg's opted out. They've decided they don't want to host. Well, it's not a good year to host the tournament. Has there been any conversation about that with Bassmasters in Waddington? By the numbers that you just presented, it looks like it's going to be a flop, I guess would be the easiest way to say it. Has there been any consideration? Is there an opt-out based on a coronavirus if they did choose to, with Bassmasters, not to have to host it? Or
Yeah.
no conversation whatsoever?
Yep. So we've Bill and Janet have been in touch with them ongoing, and we were also on a call with them Friday morning to have a frank conversation about the status of. We anticipate that if we blow through the phases here, we'll be in phase 4 just before that event, which to me makes me a little nervous. And certainly from a marketing perspective, I don't think it's worth investing a lot of money in marketing. And so that's where we were frank about that, and talked about they would really like to have the tournament, and they'd like to keep that. The contract and the value to the county includes a tremendous amount of media exposure that doesn't have, I mean, it's leveraged by our huge crowds. We always get those headlines, but that aside, the amount they put in, they stream live on ESPN, or they stream on ESPN, they stream live on Bassmaster website, and they plan to emphasize that even more this year. And so there's the kind of earned media from the promotion they do on the St. Lawrence River and fishing here has a lot of value. And so it's not just the event and the people coming for the event, but it is that media value as well. And so that, plus trying to think creatively of ways that we could still generate some activity and interest at the event in a safe way, is where we came up with that kind of option. I like the idea, especially of having the watch parties at restaurants, because that will physically get money back out to those restaurants across the county. Cranberry Lake could have a watch party. We talked about, getting swag together and sending that out to whatever watch party is across the county, really partnering with those restaurants to help them after they've been closed for so long. And at that point, we feel like they'll have a decent sense of what's their capacity, what can they do safely. And so we can work with them within their terms to have a positive experience that will generate revenue for them, generate tax revenue, bring, even if it's local people, to support it. And so I think that has value as well. So it's a different type of model, I think, by instead of having thousands and thousands of people in one location, if we can over that period of time spread them out into different locations across the county, there may be a good impact. It's not gonna, we're not pushing for people from out of the area to come in. If it seems safe that we encourage people from Watertown or Plattsburgh to come over, then that's still out of county revenue coming in. So that could have some value. So I do think there is some opportunity, and Bass is very willing to work with us to be creative in that, and mostly be safe and smart about it.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank
Mr.
you. I'll leave it
Arquette.
up to other people. I'm all set. Thank you, though.
Mr. Arquette.
Thank you, Kevin. Now, Brooke, you've described a number of different activities that your organization oversees. Some of them are motorized, some of them not. Some of them involve the multi-use trail. Some of them don't. Multi-use trail is for both motorized and non-motorized, and we certainly welcome all user groups there. But as we move forward and really need to prioritize the stronger user groups, to me, I look at it as for revenue purposes within our county, the three top revenue generators would be the bass tournaments, snowmobiles, and ATVs. And again, you're doing a lot with the Bassmaster tournaments, and I appreciate that. I've always supported them, and you're involved to a degree with promoting ATVs and snowmobiles. Saturday, I happened to be out on the trails. The usership was overwhelming. The businesses were all receiving a great deal of attention for gas, groceries. The restaurants were about an hour and 45-minute wait to provide food. There were so many people out there enjoying them. My point is that I think as we move forward, again, I know that you're responsible for a wide variety of, but I'd like to see the chamber further involved with the motorized recreation, the UTVs, snowmobiles, doing a good job with the fishing. I'd like to see the chamber go so far as, and maybe you've done this, and if you have, I was unaware, but I think it would be of great help to us moving the trail system forward if the chamber were to write a letter to the DEC to suggest the strong need for a rural county like ours, to partner up and maybe show some figures, revenue figures to the DEC to assist us in our lobbying effects to further our trail system. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arquette. Anyone else? Mr. Berg.
Thank you for the presentation, Brooke. I'm glad to hear that you're partnering with Cooperative Extension and the IDA, the businesses, and I'd like to know what your current assessment is. It's not related to tourism, but what's your current assessment of business in St. Lawrence County? And if you could share what indicators you would use to reach that assessment.
Sure. Well, we've been reaching out to all of our staff, spend half of our days probably on the phone individually with businesses. I know the IDA is reaching out to hundreds of businesses as well, as is Patrick at Cornell Cooperative Extension. I think anecdotally what we are seeing, it feels like week by week, the tone or the priority changes. And so again, we're trying to stay on top of the most urgent priority each week for our businesses. And so right now what we're seeing is that a lot of businesses have received the PPP and the idle advance. And with the PPP, it's you immediately have to get people back to work. So in the last couple of weeks, we've seen a lot of businesses reopening, and I've followed up with them, and typically it's because they got the PPP and they need to get their staff back and working. So I think that did activate the economy. It'll just be a matter of if the businesses can sustain, and that once that's gone, and they need to be generating that revenue off of normal sales, so to speak. So, and with the PPP, they're also trying to navigate the maximum forgiveness. We just shared a webinar on our eBlast about that, and there's an application available now to track PPP so that you can get the greatest forgiveness. It's just a lot for businesses to navigate, and if you don't have an accountant or a department in your small business that's dedicated to that, it's a lot of work in addition to trying to figure out how to operate now. So again, we're trying to help however we can to navigate that for folks. So that's a big one. Businesses are reopening. They're trying to figure out, can they be open? How can they be open? What are the guidelines? So we're sharing a lot of that New York State site that Dana shared. The SBDC is helping people create those reopening plans. So that's a great resource we're sending people to. But they're realizing as they're opening that it's a lot of work, to run normal business. It's not just opening up as normal. They're now cleaning extensively. They're now kind of on edge about how customers are interacting with their business and their employees. So they've had to make an investment in a lot of changes to their business, whether it's increasing their e-commerce ability for online ordering, or installing plexiglass, or buying gallons of disinfectant. So those are some of the things. But I think certainly for the county, one of the big concerns is the status of the colleges. That was a big hit this spring, and what happens in the fall will be that's a big concern of businesses, especially in Canton Potsdam right now. And for others, they're just kind of waiting for their phase to get here, and trying to figure out how they can operate. And once they can open, how they can open under those restricted guidelines of having, a third of capacity, or whatever the case may be. So those are kind of what we're dealing with right now.
Mr. Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brooke, I just want to commend you and the chamber for your efforts to keep promoting the county during this difficult time. I think it's important that we all keep in mind that back when the county decided to help support the Bassmasters Elite Fishing Tournament, the purpose of it was to make people aware, not just around here, but nationally and across North America, what a terrific fishing resource we do have with the St. Lawrence River. And it succeeded. We are now ranked the #1 bass
fishery
in North America. And the only way you keep that is by continually promoting it. And we have a tendency to take for granted that, everybody must know about Northern New York and the St. Lawrence River, but they don't. And people just are not aware of the fact that there is such a thing as the St. Lawrence River, and that it is clean, it is beautiful, it is blue, and it is one of the most beautiful places in the world. And it also has one of the greatest fisheries in the world. And if we don't make the effort to promote it on ESPN, on the Bassmasters League channel, and encourage them to rank us, we will not receive the benefits that we have an opportunity to receive by continuing to promote it. Because the reality is, when you talk about tourism promotion, it's not a one-shot thing. You can't just expect to put it out there once and that it's going to sink in. It's something that has to be continually reinforced and continually told about, because there's other places who are trying to take your place. And I think if we have an opportunity to keep putting that message out, even if we don't have the crowd of 30,000 people down in Waddington, the fact is, if we have the excitement on the television show with them talking about the St. Lawrence River, we're not going to get the full effect that we could have had if we just continued making this investment. And considering the fact that we have generated, the St. Lawrence River has generated, excess revenue through the dam, through the high water. It caused a lot of damage, but and obviously none of us wanted the damage, but we can use some of the money that it did generate to make this modest investment and continue what's been started, and the long-term benefit to the people of the entire county will be more than tenfold. The other thing is, I hope that you have talked to the tournament committee and the Bassmasters about keeping the fishing within St. Lawrence County, as much as regard as I have for our neighbors. The purpose of this is to promote the St. Lawrence County and the section of the St. Lawrence River that flows through St. Lawrence County. And I think that should be our priority, especially at a time like this.
Thank you, Mr. Reagan. And thank you, Brooke, for your presentation. That was great. Oh, Margaret, you have a question? Miss Margaret?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Brooke, this is a little bit off tourism, even though I think you touched upon the fact that people, I have a feeling, just a feeling, but there are people that are going to want to get out of New York City permanently after this. And there's always a silver lining to every tragedy. One of the things the governor has mentioned several times is a new domestic PPE industry. And we certainly have a workforce and places up here that could address some of that. Have you looked into those kind of industries coming up here? That's something brand new to the state, I think.
We, well, right away, I remember, I think that was our very first call with the developers the week things closed down. That was one of the first steps we took. We brainstormed a list of businesses we have in the county who could kind of pivot to creating PPE. So it's not attracting necessarily new, but looking at the ones that we have here to say, do you have the capacity to do this? The state is looking for it. It's an opportunity for you to help, but also generate revenue. And so I can't think of any off the top of my head. I know Patrick Kelly would have a better list if you're interested, but that was something, some of our smaller businesses started making hand sanitizer and things like that. So that was more of an internal immediate activation, I guess, to help in the situation. But you're right that looking at that as an opportunity for development of new business is certainly something to look at. Thank you.
Okay. Miss Nancy.
Excuse me, Brooke. Brooke, I just want to thank you and the St. Lawrence County Chamber for all of the work that the Chamber has done in assisting and supporting our small businesses during the New York State pause. And now in your pivot to aid these businesses in navigating in the reopening process. I think that the tools and the resources, the webinars that you're offering, that you created and compiled will help to streamline and clarify the reopening and the rephasing process for our businesses. So I just want to have you please send my gratitude to all of the employees at the Chamber.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McQuaid. Anyone else? John, Mr. Burke?
Yeah, Brooke, I'm not sure that I have an accurate or an adequate picture of the status of businesses in St. Lawrence County. I mean, I understand from what you said that there are a number of businesses who are in receipt of the grant/loan and are bringing people back. I guess I'm wondering, Brooke, is that pretty much your assessment of businesses in general? You know, it's you and certainly the IDA would have a really good idea as to what the state of the state is regarding businesses in St. Lawrence County. And I'd like to hear a little bit more about that, if you don't mind.
And it is anecdotal, really. We've talked to Dale and Patrick and I were talking the other day about trying to create a master spreadsheet to try to check the boxes of how many people that we're talking to have received assistance, for example, so that we can see those numbers. I know we were part of a survey now, I don't know, 4 weeks ago, out of JCC, where they put out a survey with a number of questions. And then I was involved in the review of that data. And things have been changing so quickly that I found as soon as the data was available, it was pretty outdated. And it was a very small sample. I always appreciate data that includes an appropriate sample, I guess, before I speak to those numbers. And I know that the timing of kind of getting the information to the JCC folks, some of our listservs weren't included in the survey, for example. So I don't think it's a great example. That group has talked about doing another survey, which I think would be really helpful, even if it's simply said, you know, what have you been able to take advantage of? That survey was pretty long, and a number of things were included, but I think a survey like that at this time that you know the opportunities are kind of closing and you've either got them or not, to some degree, would give us a really good idea of where businesses are as far as taking advantage of that relief. And then I think the other question, which was asked in the beginning, was, do you anticipate closing for good, reopening in this amount of time? You know, how much wiggle room do you have before this is really going to completely devastate your business? And so I think some of those questions that were asked originally would be valuable to ask again as well. I was just talking, I think Nancy and I were talking this morning about how many businesses have closed because of this. And the ones that we've heard of, again, anecdotally, that have closed were kind of on the brink of closure anyway, and this was the nail in the coffin, so to speak. But for the most part, businesses have been pretty resilient and creative, and however, how long they can sustain that once the support leaves a little bit, and if different things shift, for example, if the colleges don't return in the fall, or if other major markets for manufacturers, you know, supply chains have been interrupted, things like that, there are still a number of unknown things that may continue to impact businesses or may become of greater impact as time goes by. It's just pretty amazing how things change day by day. But you would like to see data, right? Is that what I'm getting, John?
Well, it would be, I mean, I like the idea of the spreadsheet you spoke with Patrick about. I mean, I think, you know, as it relates to, you have a much better grip, and so does Patrick, on what's happening with businesses in the county than I believe most legislators have. And I think it would be valuable information. I'm not sure what we can do, but we certainly can't take action on information we don't have or data we don't have. So, I mean, if there's any way that you and Patrick could compile or give kind of an ongoing assessment of how tough things are for our businesses, I think it would be helpful for us.
Okay. And we are, Patrick and I and Dale are on the new task force. And so we are in touch in that way also. But I can talk to him about another way to do that. I think the other thing is I want to thank you all. I know you've been talking to a number of business owners throughout this, and it's a lot. We're in this 24 hours a day and trying to keep up with it. It's a lot for you to do. So I just want to make sure that you know that you can refer them to us at the chamber, you can refer them to the IDA, and we will find the right answers. If I get a question that I think Patrick can answer better, I will refer them. If they want a reopening plan, I'll send them to the SBDC. We're working together again to try to reach everybody. So don't you feel like you need to know know everything. You should know some things. But I also shared, and I believe you're all on the listserv, Margaret, I might need to add you, but I sent out an email on Saturday. Took me a few hours to put together, but it includes essentially if you have been open or you're in phase 1, these are the steps you need to be mindful of. And then it has all the links to the state websites, that lookup tool Dana mentioned, the guidelines, the plan templates, and then link to make an appointment with the SBDC. If you're in future phases, these are the kind of things that you need to start getting in order. So it's kind of moving beyond that original, here are all the funding opportunities, here's the support that you can get, the resources. Now this email is fully focused on reopening based on where you are in the phases. And so hopefully if you didn't see that in your email, I know you get a lot of emails and I often end up in spam, but you can try to search that or reach out to me and I can send it to you. And if you star it and send that on to folks who your constituents, I assure you they will be appreciative.
Thank you.
Okay, I think Mr. Forsyth has one more question, and we've been at this for almost an hour. Dave?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Kevin. The one business I would encourage people to, if it's in their realm, is car dealers. We just got the sales tax numbers today. I know the car dealers are way down, way down as opposed to the last year to date. That's our biggest sales tax driver without a doubt. And that's someplace that if anyone's looking to buy a car, now's the time, I would say. Hopefully that will take off in one of the phases fairly shortly. The other thing I just wanted to note with Jim, I agree wholeheartedly about promoting the St. Lawrence River. There's no question about it. The only thing is it comes at a cost, and what the cost is the thing that always has to be discussed, I think. Value for the dollar. So I'm all set. Thank you.
First one. Thank you very much. Thank you, Brooke. Okay, we'll move on to resolutions. This is match the first one. Oh, it does. Okay, all right. Okay, so our first resolution is with Highway with Mr. Chambers. The resolution is authorizing the chair to sign a contract with Stantec Consulting Services for engineering and design services for County Route 35 bridge over Trout Brook, bin number 3341700, pin number 775394, and modifying the 2020 budget for the Department of Highways. Moved by Mr. Denisha, seconded by Ms. Nancy Arquette. Mr. Chambers.
Yes, thank you. This project you approved, the contract with New York State last month. This is a project that was not included in the 2020 budget. And the proposal in this budget is to move money from the Browns Bridge project to this County Road 35 project. And to hire Stantec Consulting Services as the consultant. This is a 80-55% local funds project, and this is for the design phase. The Browns Bridge project is delayed slightly because of a change that's required on that project, and it's changing the environmental requirements and such, and some design. We basically have to replace the pier. So then of course, it changed a lot of environmental requirements, because now we're going to be working in the water. So that's my proposal, is to take funds from a project that's being delayed by basically, for the most part, into 2021 for construction, and utilizing them to start on the design of this new project.
Any questions for Mr. Chambers concerning this resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Our next thank you. Our next resolution is approving federal aid highway project for the preliminary engineering and design for the St. Lawrence County Bridge Preservation, 2 bridges, bid number 3340-980, bid number 3341-780, and pin number 7753-96. Moved by Rita Curran and second by Mr. Denisha and Mr. Fay. Mr. Chambers.
Yes, again, as last month, bringing forward an agreement to sign a contract with the state of New York for with New York State to fund the project. This is again another new project. One is on Island. One of the bridges is on Island Branch Road in the town of Fowler, near River Road, and the other one is on County Road 27 in DeGrasse, near the Tully Pond Road in the town of Russell. These structures, this is basically a rehabilitation, not a replacement of projects, and that's why they're being deemed as preservation.
Any questions for Mr. Chambers concerning this resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain.
Okay, Mr. Perkins abstains.
Abstaining due to my employment.
Okay, understand. All right, so the resolution is carried. Our next resolution is authorizing the chair to sign a contract with Delta Engineers, Architects, and Land Surveyors, DPC, for engineering and design services for the St. Lawrence County Bridge Preservation, 2 bridges, bin 3340-980, bin 3341-780, pin number 7753-96, and modifying the 2020 budget for the Department of Highways. Moved by Mr. Denisha, second by Ms. Curran and Mr. Forsyth. Mr. Chambers.
Yes, a very similar explanation of where the funds are looking at doing the transfer from the Browns Bridge project to fund. Again, this is a new project that was not in the 2020 budget. However, due to the delay in the Browns Bridge project, we would be able to fund it in this manner.
Any questions for Mr. Chambers concerning this resolution? Mr. Perkins.
I'll be abstaining due to my employment with JEC and contracting.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. Anyone else? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Our next resolution is authorizing the acceptance of real property obtained by New York State relative to the Depot Street over Dere River Bridge Replacement Project, pin 7753-86. Moved by Mr. Arquette, seconded by Ms. Curran. And Mr. Perkins. Mr. Chambers.
Yes, this project was approved by the board to move along. So this is a resolution basically to accept the real estate that will be acquired to do this project. There are 3 on the attached map. There are 3 parcels, two of which are under 300 square feet, and they're very small strips right along the edge of the highway boundary. at the intersection of Main Street, County Road 55, Depot Street, and in a permanent easement, not and basically to allow us to put in the necessary guide railing and other approach work to the proposed bridge. The third item is a temporary easement to allow for temporary realignment of the Cornell Road intersection with Depot Street, which would allow traffic to move through the area. Without that temporary easement, traffic would be closed on Cornell Road and Depot Street alike.
Any questions for Mr. Chambers concerning this resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Our next resolution is approving federal aid and local project supplemental agreement number 2 for the final design for Depot Street over Dere River. Bid number 322-0850, pin number 775386, and modifying the 2020 budget for the Department of Highways. Moved by Mr. Arquette, seconded by Ms. Curran and Mr. Lightfoot. Mr. Chambers.
Yes, this resolution allows us to do a supplemental agreement with New York State for the final design portion of the Depot Street Bridge. This project is, as I had said earlier, has been moving right along and was funded by the Bridge to New York program, but needs another resolution and an amendment of funds out of Brown's Bridge to move this forward.
Any questions for Mr. Chambers concerning this resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, motion carried. Our next resolution is approving federal aid local project supplemental agreement number 2 for right-of-way incidentals and acquisition for Depot Street over Dere River. Bid number 322-0850, pin number 775386. Moved by Mr. Arquette, second by Mrs. Arquette and Rita Curran. Ms. Curran. Mr. Chambers.
Yes, the resolution that you just looked at for accepting the right-of-way, this is a resolution to pay for the balance of the acquisition costs. The New York State DOT originally gave an estimate, and the actuals are coming in $2,000 higher than what New York State DOT's original estimate.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Chambers concerning this resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. That's the last of our resolutions for highway. We have a maintenance shop parts update. Mr. Chambers.
Yes, we've been under contract with a parts supplier for a number of years, which includes basically a parts store within the highway facility. And the contract ends shortly with that approximately 6 months. So at this point, looking at the costs associated with this project or with this service, the similar service without the store within the facility could be obtained at a much more reasonable amount than what we are currently paying, by several thousands a month savings by going to a different vendor. And with the new vendor, we still not have to front the money for inventory. Inventory would be also owned by this vendor, except for specialty parts. And again, the same as our current vendor, but again, at state prices, which are lower than this current contract.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chambers. Any questions for Mr. Chambers? So, yes, Mr. Denisha.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just a comment, not a question. I think when Mr. Chambers and I talked about this a couple weeks ago, I think it's an excellent idea. It's rather than having taxpayer money tied up in inventory. This is certainly a smart way to go, and I applaud him for bringing it up.
Thank you. So next up is vacancy. There's a bunch of positions. I'm going to have Mrs. Doyle speak to this.
So you may recall at the April Finance Committee meeting, we did not have the highway resolutions or the highway vacancies on the agenda. However, they were in your packet. These were actually reviewed at the April meeting and held for this meeting. So you should have before you all of the vacancies. You should have 2 organizational charts in your packet. One, how it exists now, and one, how it is proposed, as well as a breakdown of the cost. So Don will walk through the position changes. And I believe if you let him get through the explanation, he'll take any of your questions. Don?
Thank you. Yes, I appreciate that. Yes, this is something that I've been working on for quite some time, looking at weaknesses and strengths within the department, and also looking at succession planning and competitiveness in the labor market. I think you'll find that this plan addresses those issues. So on the sheet that gives the cost breakdown, I think is probably a good one to look at if you don't mind, if you have that. And one of the first thing on there is the sign shop supervisor position abolished. That position is vacant due to a retirement. The next one on the list is abolish a temporary laborer position. The next one is abolishing a senior motor equipment mechanic position. And then as far as the upgrades, we've got to create a motor equipment MEO position, which is motor equipment operator, and create a heavy equipment operator, winter maintenance supervisor, create a maintenance supervisor shop supervisor position, upgrade 3 heavy equipment operators, HEOs, to HEO labor crew leaders, upgrade the sign maintenance crew leader from a grade 23 to a grade 24, and upgrade 10 laborers to MEOs. Now, if I could start back with the top with the sign shop supervisor position. Basically, in direct line with that, trading position for position, it's basically a create an MEO motor equipment operator out of that position. The supervision of those individuals in the sign shop area would be covered by another supervisor, another maintenance supervisor, and also overseen by the deputy position that was also part of the first part of the 2019 restructuring, first step of the restructuring plan. The senior motor equipment mechanic position would be eliminated and replaced by the supervisor maintenance shop supervisor position, and also which is also oversaw by the deputy position. With the elimination of the sign shop supervisor position, the sign maintenance crew leader would take on some additional requirements, which would result in a grade change from a grade 23 to a grade 24. The upgrade of the 10 labor positions to motor equipment operators would in one way allow us to be more competitive in the open market, moving the entry level, most of the entry level positions up 2 pay grades, but also more closely reflect the task as things move forward of a more mechanized workforce rather than a labor intensive workforce. More and more things with our smaller workforce needs to be mechanized rather than manual labor. The overall, what this is basically a cost neutral way of reorganizing. It's basically a small savings of $353. But it also may help us on the revenue side some, and until the positions are actually filled annually, how they vote on or they bid on their jobs. I couldn't tell you what positions are going to be on a state route or not, so it would be impossible for me to tell you if there's going to be a revenue, but it's a potential for a slight increase in revenue from the state for state snow plowing. But a big portion here is succession planning, and I'd like to point out with the with our moving our crew leaders, moving to some crew leaders will be our future site maintenance supervisors. At this point, we only have crew leaders on our bridge crews and on our sign shop. We do not have any crew leaders out on the job sites in particular. So HEOs act as heavy equipment operators, act as straw bosses. This would get, and without that on-the-job training as supervisors in a formalized way, it basically would not allow them to move forward up the chain of command and into a higher position of supervisor. So with the restructuring, like I said, succession planning, it helps address the succession planning issue. It helps us be more competitive in the market as far as the with the labor positions going to motor equipment operators. It more closely reflects what is actually going on in the marketplace today, where things are getting more mechanized and are required to be more mechanized to get the work done. So I guess then we do have some other positions that were vacant due to we have 2 motor equipment operators that were vacant due to promotions. They moved, the 2 MEO positions moved to HEOs and now has created a vacancy, those 2 vacancies. And we have a bridge construction mechanic that is vacant, and that is due to a termination. I know that's a lot of information and a lot of moving around, but I hope I at least started to answer questions with that.
Mr. Chambers, does anyone have any questions for Mr. Chambers?
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
can I offer?
Mrs. Doyle would like to make a comment.
I would also just like to mention that out of the vacancy review, the discussion was approved by the Vacancy Review Committee. With regard to all of these changes, there were several discussions. I would say Don probably underemphasized the length of time he's been looking at this. I think it's probably been in excess of 4 years, looking at assessing what impact it would have on the department, looking at the staff that he has and the staff that he brings in, and carefully consider what would be best for the department. So I did just want to mention that.
Okay. Good luck with that, Mr. Chambers.
Thank you.
Okay, so seeing no more questions for Mr. Chambers, we'd like to move on to our treasurer, Renee Cole. And it's the resolution for adopting the mortgage tax report.
Hello, thank you. So this is a semi-annual resolution that allows the treasurer's office to distribute monies collected by the county that are due to the towns. The county clerk turns the funds over to my office monthly, and twice a year, the clerk submits a report to New York State for approval. Upon approval from the state, we submit adoption. This amount represents the October 19 through March 2020 collections. And in comparison, this was for $371,000 and some change. In 19, it was $391,000 for the same half of a year. In 2018, it was $382,000. So it's running about normal so far.
Okay, so first of all, let's get a motion in favor of the resolution. Mr. Forsythe, second by Ms. Curran, Ms. Arquette, and Mr. Arquette. Okay, Renee, you'll have to do that all over again. No, that's fine.
So what I said a minute ago.
Yeah, just what you said. So any questions for Mrs. Cole concerning this? All those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, motion carried. Okay, so now we have the 2019 year-end report from Mrs. Cole.
Okay, and we're going to share the screen for this report. We'll see if this works. Let me know when or if you can see it.
Okay, we got the cover sheet right now.
Okay, perfect. And if you don't mind, before I start that, can I just give a quick rundown, a couple of other things so that
Certainly.
I don't forget at the end? I just wanted to let you know that the bank reconciliation summary, the monthly one that we do, is on Google Drive. That was for March. Our office filed our AUD document. That's our annual financial report to New York State. That was filed on May 7th of this year. So we're on track with that. I emailed right before the meeting the final May sales tax. Those numbers are in your email. When I removed the village aim payment, May is about 19% under the same two payments last year. It's bad news, but I know compared to some counties, I'm trying to find a bright side. We're a little bit better off than some of them. And lastly, another thing just to update you about, our fourth quarter tribal payment from New York State. So it's on the state fiscal year. So it would be January, February, and March period. We typically receive that around the 5th of April. We have it on our calendars to watch for it, and we still have not received it as of this date. So a couple of days ago, I emailed my contact. There's an employee there who emails me the detail for the payments that we're receiving. And her response was that the fourth quarter has not been done yet. And as soon as she can, the payment and information will be coming your way. Sorry, I can't give you a more specific answer. So it's kind of gray. I'm not quite sure what that means, but we are beyond a month past when we usually receive it, which means that, we distribute half of this, a quarter each, to the town of Messina and the town of Brazier. So they can pay them until we receive it as well.
Charge interest. We charge
Yes.
state interest.
And I think that is all I had for the updates, and we'll get started on the 2019 unaudited results. This is just the cover sheet for the presentation. And I want to make sure that Deb has been able to join me because she will be doing a couple of sections of this report. I don't know if you're there, Deb.
I am here.
Okay, thank you. All right, I will get moving right along. The very next page after the cover sheet are the fund equity comparisons for 14 through 19. This includes all funds except capital, and it does not include solid waste or workers' comp. So I'll move right to the next slide, which does include the extra funds except for capital. And I'll try to enlarge it a little bit because the most interesting section is usually the improvement, hopefully, between 18 and 2019. So to my notes on this. As you can see, for 2019, we had a large overall increase in fund balance. The difference between the total fund equity for general, this number and this number, the 28.7, is $6,088,689. And I'll remind once again that these are pre-audit, so all these numbers will change to some extent at some point. Reserve balances are very similar from year to year, the 534 versus the 570. Unreserved, unappropriated fund balance is the big difference here. That increased by $5.96 million. Factors for that increase include budgeted fund balance and contingency, and the amount that was left unspent in contingency. Last year was a kind of a go-to year for the contingency, so not everything that had originally been earmarked for fund balance made it, but $833,000 did make it into the fund balance. Public Health Department came in $543,000 under budget this year, and the Sheriff's Department was under budget, $771,000. And I don't expect that you recall this, but last year, both of those departments were contributors as well to this. The Treasurer's Office, we came in just $2 million gross sales tax over budget, which was a major contribution. And in addition to that, we were $3 million underspent in benefits, and the bulk of that was in hospital and medical for about $2.6 million under budget. The next column is for county road. This column here is the county road fund balance. I can't have you see the top and the bottom. Sorry about that. I'd rather focus on these. County road increased fund balance, $583,000. The next column beside that is the road machinery fund. They decreased their fund balance by $83,000, which is means they had a pretty good budget, I think, if you hit that close to your mark on a balanced budget. Liability and casualty is the next fund beside that. They did see a decrease in fund balance, $381,000. That's due in part to resolutions appropriating fund balance to modify the 2019 budget. If you recall, Resolution 366-2019 was for the Wells settlement. It was a $400,000 appropriation from fund balance, as well as Resolution 402 took $100,000 out of the fund balance to increase the budget to pay outside counsel. So they, based on that, you can tell that they didn't use the full $500,000, they're $381,000. That was made up for as a result of operations. So they didn't exceed their regular budget with that. So the column next to that is the solid waste column that's showing a $483,000 improvement. But I will also say that with the fact that part of our audit, our auditors provide us with entries to make for OPEB expenses and pension liabilities, and typically they are in that ballpark. So they will probably more likely break even on the fund balance. Self-insurance fund is the last column on this, and that's on increase in their fund balance. Actually, that's direct result of operations. It was a combination of factors. They spent $200,000 less than budget on their workers' comp benefits, and their prior year refunds exceeded budget by $251,000. In addition to that, there was zero budgeted for investment earnings, but the investments made by the Treasurer's Office earned $153,000 for the self-insurance fund last year. So all of these figures, once again, I'll just mention unaudited. So I do expect some of them will change, especially solid waste and the self-insurance fund, which we make entries for OPEB and pension liabilities, but those are entries provided by the auditors. If there's no questions, I'll move on to the next page. Okay. So this page is a general fund balance sheet for 2019. I provide it for information only. Assets are on the left and on the right is liabilities and fund equity, and they balance, which is important. But the real meat of this is actually on the next two pages. This is the comparison report for 18 and 19 for changes to the balance sheet accounts. So I will try to keep these brief, but there's a lot of larger variances. So I just wanted to try to give you an explanation of what the numbers are for and what they consist of. At the top, the biggest one right off the bat is a 48% decrease in cash. But if you recall just a minute ago, I mentioned something about the treasurer's office doing investments. If you scroll down under A450, you'll see that there was 0 investments in 18 and there's $10.7 million invested as of December 35th, 2019. 35th, did I just say? December 31st, sorry. These two, when taken in combination, the cash and the investments, are actually a slight increase of 4.12%. So we just, instead of it sitting in cash, it's sitting in an investment account at the end of the year. Okay. Next is in the taxes receivable. The largest variance here is the property acquired for taxes, a 12.25% change. This dollar amount represents the amount that's for properties that are now in the foreclosure process. And it's actually an accumulation of years because we don't always sell and foreclose on properties. So this number fluctuates year to year, also based on what got moved into this and what has not sold also. So overall, though, if you look at the taxes receivable, it's only 0.72 variance. So it's not a big difference. A lot of times things move over out of the overdue account into the foreclosure account. So you'll see movement through those every year. The next is the state and federal aid receivables. State and federal aid receivables are up 20.3%. It's the timing of the payments and the advances received from the state. This is a snapshot in time. So those will fluctuate. You know, we have a large budget. We bill for a lot of things, and it's the timing of when we bill, when we record it, and when things get paid. The same goes, honestly, for the social services. That is the only one that is in this category. It has a large dollar amount, but I looked last year's report. Last year was down 23.6 from the prior year. So the year before this, that number was a higher number. Did it move on me? It did. Sorry. There, we lost it. So this last year compared to the year before was 8 million the year before. So they move a lot. And again, it's a snapshot in time. So if we receive a payment, a monthly payment for the DSS receivables could be $2 to $3 million. So it's all about timing when you're talking about the size of their budget. And we'll scroll down to the A430 account. The towns and cities is 15.56%. This account is the account that we record the refunds and corrections in, and it's cleared out on an annual basis. So these are corrections for taxes. And if you recall, we present a resolution for your adoption in October, November every year to charge back, to make those chargebacks on the levy. So that's when that gets zeroed out, but it's an all year long process. That number moves all the time. And right above that, or below that, I'm sorry, is the A440, the due from, I'm not sure. Yes, the due from other governments. This is largely the difference in what was collected in the city of Ogdensburg, but not yet turned over to the county. So it's a big percentage, but it's not a big dollar amount difference there. But because of the percentage, I just thought I would explain what it was. And I think that's it on the asset side of things. I'll move on to the next page, which is the liabilities and fund equity. So we'll start at the top. Right at the top, there is a 13.51% difference in accounts payable. And again, this is the timing. If we receive a product or service that was ordered and used in 2019, we need to record the expense in the proper year, and an accounts payable is set up for things that are paid for in the subsequent year. So this just moves all, it's a moving number all the time. It just depends on what made it in before December 31st to get paid. Next is overpayments and clearing. Account had a large variance, but really dollar-wise, in the scheme of things with our numbers, this is not really a substantial amount. But this account is used to place funds until we're ready or authorized to distribute them. Largely, it consists of bankruptcy funds placed here awaiting settlement for taxes. So when a property goes under bankruptcy protection and we receive payments from the bankruptcy attorney, we deposit it here until everything is closed out and we get the court order saying how it's to be distributed. So let's see on my notes is due to other funds right below that. Another large percentage, but kind of a small dollar amount. As a reminder of what this is, these numbers change based on what is owed from one internal fund to another as of December 31st. And we do a lot of journal entries that charge back internal work, postage, printing, the highway interdepartmental journal entry. Those are all things that we use in December, but we can't put the bill together until January. But one fund owes another fund money. We record it under the due to other funds. Deferred revenues is A691 down here with a 20% difference. Deferred revenues, this number is largely related to community services and is again about the timing of receipts from New York State and booking earned revenues. So the state advances state aid to community services and is put in this account until they have earned it or they have passed through the money in order to claim the revenue against it. So once they have spent it, they can book the revenue, carve it out of here and put it in a revenue account. And lastly, the total special, sorry about that, total special reserves, the 8.47 or a 2.53 difference for all the reserves. It's a small amount, but I just wanted to tell you that one of the very last pieces of paper in here has the breakdown of the miscellaneous reserve accounts for your reference. So because there's a number of reserves in that $1.1 million. And if you don't have any questions for me on any of these, or I can move on to Deb's portion of the presentation. Okay.
Go ahead. Yep, go ahead.
This is Deb, you all set?
I'm all set.
Okay.
Okay, so this page is a department budget performance report. So it lists each department individually. On the top is Fund 1, the general fund. It lists the adopted budget, the modified budget, and then the actual year-to-date performance of each department. And I've gone to say that 17 out of the 24 departments within the general fund had a positive, a more favorable year-to-date actual than their modified budget. So that's certainly in the right direction and does total the 6 million that Renee talked about being added to fund balance. You can see that in the shaded area that she's showing you, along with total appropriations, total revenues, the transfers, which the 11 million is to county road, and then the county cost. And I wanted to note that, of course, in the adopted budget, the just under 48 million is the tax calculation. In the modified budget, you'll notice there's an increase in county cost, which may seem odd. That number comes from encumbrances, which are purchase orders that were items ordered in the previous year but haven't been received yet. So the system rolls those forward and it brings forward the expense, but not the related revenue. And of course, if there's revenue associated with an expense, we would record that in the actual. The reserves also roll in a way that they increase, they appear to be a county cost in the modified budget, but that's something we hadn't touched on before. And then you'll see in the far right, the 6 million performance that added to fund balance. The next section is the performance of the other funds. So here's you'll notice they all start with a 0 balanced budget for the adopted budget. They do modifications throughout the year to add new projects, new costs, and depending on what is actually accomplished throughout the year is the end result. These are all better result than their modified budget. The very last line is the capital project fund 6. This is only other capital projects. It does not include the capital projects from the highway department. Those are accounted for separately, and we'll see those in the next report. But I wanted to report that that 338,000 balance in the adopted and modified budget is now a list of specific projects. In the past, that had not been the case. And we now have a list of 9 specific projects and 1 blended combined account in building and grounds that has 10 individual projects within it. Every project is tracked according to their expenses and if they have associated revenue. And it may look odd that the capital project fund has a revenue of balance to the good. This is because when projects are added, they're pre-funded. So the money is actually moved into the capital project fund. So in 2019, there were a number of projects added. So that's why it results in a revenue balance for year to date. Okay, on this report, it's a rather lengthy report. I'll just go over the summaries. The top funds combined is a combination of all funds except Fund 6 capital projects, 70 of WIOA or the One Stop Care Center, and Fund 10 of NIPA. It is actually 2019 actual. The heading was missed. So this shows you the performance of all of the funds combined for each category. You'll see that each of the categories is underspent, and also the revenue is under received compared to the modified budget, which makes sense based on reimbursement. The remaining pages of this report show by department the same categories. So you can go through line by line and see how each department performed within the categories. One other area that's shown on this report is the Fringe Not Distributed. This is what we've called the unallocated fringe. It's the fringe cost of retirees and over or underspending for benefits that we charge departments. So there's a chargeback that's calculated with the payroll, but for example, health insurance may be more or less than our estimates. That amount is distributed to the departments here so that you can see an actual cost per department, and it's based on their share of the overall fringe cost. It doesn't look that much when you look at each department, but it totals about $9.5 million for the year. So that is included in this report also. So if we fast forward ahead to page 8, pages of this section 1 to 7 are all the departments within the general fund. When we go to page 8, it will show you the other funds, which should come up shortly. Here we go. And there's Fund 3, the county road machinery, solid waste, the same as the beginning by category. And it shows you the performance of each department. If we go to the end of this report, to the capital projects, you'll notice there's 2 sections of capital projects. One, the first is the highway projects, and I wanted to note that $3,475,000 was the adopted budget that highway had for capital projects. The actual budget for these projects is in Fund 3, and it flows through Fund 6 as they are capital projects, but it's funded from the county road department. And the bottom section, the other projects, are the accumulation of all the projects I was telling you about. So you can see the revenue that was added and how the resulting year-end numbers were calculated. Any questions on any of that? That's the overall department fund and category performance.
I would just, I'm sorry, Kevin, may I say something? It's Renee.
Certainly.
Yeah, okay. And I said this, we reviewed this with the Fiscal Stability Committee before this, and I just wanted to know about the capital projects for us. This, a couple of years ago, this would not have been in an annual report, let alone a quarterly report, because of the status of the accounting for the capital projects, even when I came into the office. So this has been a focus, and it's been a work in progress for a couple of years, but we're finally got it to the point where we have solid numbers and can run a year-to-date budget report and can talk about what's left in the project and honestly, and run a balance sheet report to give to our auditors for capital that means something compared to what we had in the past. And this has been one of Deb's honest, I don't know, labor of love type thing. So I just want to thank her for her work on this because she's done a great job with it.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions for Renee or Deb? You'll have to speak up because we still got the slides. Does anyone have any questions?
Change it back. No. You switch it back over. Oh, ask Renee if she can.
Share?
Yeah, can you unshare?
You have to unshare, Renee.
Will I just mention these last two slides that we put in? I'll just say quick, pretty self-explanatory. This is the miscellaneous reserve breakdown that I mentioned earlier, this 1154, so you can see what it consists of. And the very last thing that we like to throw out there for your information is the tax collection rate by year for the, for the work done by our tax office. So, and now I'll stop share. Thank you.
Okay, there's going to be a test on this given after this meeting, so.
I was going to say that. Thank you. Yes, pop quiz.
I think, Mr. Forsyth, have you got a question? Just still muted, yep.
No.
Go ahead, Dave, if you have a question.
Oh, I didn't have a question. I didn't have
Okay.
a question. I was just getting back on. I got kicked off here.
Okay, I was just gonna say, you used up all your time on the Chamber of Commerce anyway.
I know, I can't help myself.
Okay, well, thank you for Renee and Debbie. That's great work.
Thank you.
Nice explanation. Next up is our County Administrator report, Ruth Doyle.
Yes, a few things to update you on this evening. First, COVID related. This is day 62 since we reduced the county workforce following the governor's directive, and day 55 since our first case. Phase 1, as you know, is underway, and I think it was very helpful to have Dr. Williams and Dr. McGuire explain more, I think, than the public's getting generally about how we need to continue the safe practices. So I'm grateful they were able to attend. The reopening task force of the legislators that were appointed by Chairman Lightfoot have convened twice and will continue working. Public Health and Chamber of Commerce hosted a conference last week for small businesses and businesses of all sizes. They've recorded that and they're making that available for the public. At Chair Kelly's request, which Chair Patrick Kelly is chairing the reopening task force for us, we've included Dale Rice from the Small Business Development Center, and he's been helpful in terms of how we reach small businesses and get the information out. We also talked at great length about how we send messaging out both as we move through the phases, but also take the advice of Dr. Williams and Dana in moving forward and convert that so that it isn't a cumbersome process, and that anywhere the county can be helpful, that we do that. The state of emergency that was in place since April 14th expired last Thursday. That was allowed to expire, but can be put back into place with the Department of Health approval should the numbers and the response require an increase. We continue to improve the metrics available on the website, some of which you saw Dana has put together that will be available, as well as the general information. So please check the website. Reopening plans for county departments are being assembled. Those will also include physical location modifications, and we'll begin this week walking around. Some have already been made, for example, in the Department of Motor Vehicles as required by the state, but additional areas where separation not only between the public and employees, but between employees, depending on spatial arrangements, can be accomplished. We'll put those together and I'll bring you an estimate of what that looks like as we move toward what will be a reopening of county government. Tomorrow, the 4th Judicial District Administrative Judge Felix Katina will be on site for a very similar purpose. He'll be walking the building as he's touring all of the counties in the district to assess the changes necessary as the courts will begin their reopening process on a small scale this coming Wednesday. I wanted to let you know that vertical security efforts have been placed on hold. As you know, we were looking to lock down the building with the exception of the entrance outside your chambers, as well as the atrium by the courts. Due to staffing levels of the courts administration, we're not able to accomplish that at this time. So I'll keep you posted if we're able to. I believe the number they need is 16, and they have 13 at this time. They have canceled, I understand, 2 academies based on budget constraints, but as we get more information, I will share that with you. Currently, county operations, as you know, are 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. As of May 26th, following the holiday, we will move to our traditional summer hours, which are 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. However, as part of the CSEA contract implementation, the county will remain on 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. office hours year-round. So we'll make the posting and provide a press release to inform the public. There's no meeting next week as we'll observe the Memorial Day holiday, but I did mention last week an opportunity tonight to talk about the interest of the board to continue holding Zoom meetings or to resume in-person meetings. And I would remind you at this time that county government is on hold in the status we're currently in until at least Thursday, May 28th, or advice of the governor in executive order. So I just wanted to have an opportunity, Mr. Chairman, to take feedback and perhaps make a determination, at least for the June board meeting, how the group would like to meet. Currently, the decision's been made up until tonight's meeting.
Okay, anybody have any comment? What say ye? Ms. Curran.
I think that it's at a point that we could get back to the boardroom in person with some social distancing and a mask if people want. I think that people would like to see some sense of normalcy return. If nothing, we would maybe give them a little bit of hope that things can get back to some sort of normal at some time.
Okay, Mr. Arquette.
Thanks, Kevin. I feel just the opposite, that, I think that we're able to accomplish everything that we need to do at this time. I'm eager to get back in person, but as we do encourage folks to try to continue to separate themselves, I don't think there's any need for us to reconvene at this point. Thank you.
Mrs. Haggard.
I agree with Mr. Arquette.
Anyone else? Mr. Lightfoot.
I think that given that the 28th is going to be coming up on us here very quickly, I think it gives very little notice to the public, very little notice to everybody that deals with the board, by, setting up to come back in person for June. While I agree 110% that I certainly like and certainly think that the board operates a little more efficiently when we're all together in the same room, I think that I don't want to send the wrong message to people by jumping on this and the first opportunity that we have. We don't know what is going to happen as more of the folks tend to start congregating, and as we know they will. And if we experience a jump in numbers, we could be back to where we were 3 weeks ago. So my feeling is that if the rest of the board agrees, that we should continue in June and then make a decision at the end of June. Another month, as painful as it may be, isn't going to kill us.
Ms. Turbinelli.
I was thinking the same exact thing for planning purposes, to get a directive on the 28th and then have to turn around a meeting just a few days later on your end, on the county end. I just think it's better for planning purposes to continue with the virtual meetings.
I have a few more things.
Anyone else? Okay, seeing none. Mr. Denisha.
Yeah, just to make it quick, I concur with Chair Lightfoot. I think it's an opportunity for us to lead by example. In another month, as much as I miss everybody, we'll get through it.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Doyle would like to make a few more comments.
So in light of what it sounds like a continued Zoom meeting presence for June, we have structured a public comment opportunity by email. As you know, with a rush in March to start this meeting environment and then continued in April, we've been trying to look at safe environments for public comment. And to that end, we would like to provide an email, which I'll say now. It is publiccomment@stlawco.org. That's public comment, one word, at stlawco.org. And in that way, we could accept emails that meet community standards, certainly through a file share by short video, through Dropbox or Google Drive or those types of file shares. If we could receive those by May 28th, that would allow us to make sure it's in a file format that we can share with you. That would also allow by email receipt, Dylan to be able to go back and work to make sure it's something that we can make work over Zoom. So we'll put that out for the public and get that address out there so that if there's folks that like to make sure that you hear from them, that we can do that. I did want to give you an update. It's been a little bit of time since the employee recognition numbers. And over the last few weeks, we have celebrated Public Health Week, Public Safety Communications, National Correction and Correction Officers, and most recently, National Police Week. So we've provided meals to many county staff. And I wanted to let you know the total spent since this fund began is $2,124.89. If you recall, last summer, we held the summer ice cream event outside. And then at the beginning of the year, we held the Surgeys event. Both were very appreciated by employees. And there's a balance in the account of $3,718.36. So while it's been challenging to continue in the traditional idea of employee recognition, we've been trying to take the opportunity, certainly for folks who continue working through this time and through national celebrations of sorts, to recognize them, thank them for their work, and make sure they know they're appreciated. So we'll get back to other types. We've done a survey of employees. We have some other ideas, but they're a little more difficult to implement during this time. So I just wanted to give you that update. Also, with the fiscal stability meeting today, as Renee mentioned, the audit progress will change as the auditors take a look at things. However, we did exceed the 1.68 million that was set aside for contingency for the fund balance policy in 2019. And we've done that every year. However, depending on the operations and the need for contingency funds, it may not have come from that original set aside. And as a reminder, budgets of all kinds are your best guess with the information that you have at the time. And certainly we'll be making those modifications this year, but our expectation is that it will be changing over the last few years, and we'll carefully consider the reserve recommendations. So that was also part of the meeting tonight, was a discussion briefly about the reserves. And if you recall, at the June meeting, I am by resolution required to provide you with a recommendation for the reserves. Those reserves include capital, employee accrued liability, and most recently, self-insurance liability. It may be more difficult this year to make those type of recommendations with what we're facing. Similarly, at the June meeting by resolution, the board is tasked to provide me with a recommendation for what to budget in the fund balance policy. Again, that may also be difficult this year, looking forward to the challenges we may be facing. So I would ask that at that meeting next month, the Fiscal Stability and Audit Committees agree to meet again before Finance in June. And I'll bring you a recommendation to the June Finance meeting, but it may require a little bit more flexibility, similar to 2020, if you recall last year, the discussions that we held. I did want to mention, similar to what Renee shared with you about the compact revenue, that there was also some funds in jeopardy relative to the WIOA funds from the federal level. And it was across the state. It wasn't St. Lawrence County specific, but the funding was about 2 weeks behind what we were expecting. And I'll remind you that that pays for 6.5 FTEs and a number of programs that both happen through the One Stop Career Center as well as through the WIOA programs with BOCES and with some of the school districts, things like that. So after quite a bit of conversation over a few days, that funding started to flow again. And I'll provide you with specifics on how much we're talking about and what the concerns were. But I'm concerned that as we move through the remainder of the year, unknown things like this has only state intervention as a pass-through, we were not going to receive, and it did arrive late. I will take any questions that you have related to any of these or other items from tonight's meeting.
Does anyone have any questions for Ruth? Well, the other thing that was mentioned tonight was the gaming funds. They're a month late. So there may be more of these games being played in the future. You have anything else, Ruth?
One more.
Ruth has one more.
So at our meeting last week, there was a request about assessing the needs. And Legislator Burke brought up a concern about how we sort through those discussions, and Legislator Denisha, or Chair Denisha from that meeting, requested that Jason and I discuss how we might accomplish that. So there were a couple of areas that we talked about and different approaches that we might take. We talked about the main areas of assessment that would include everything from mental and physical health to finances, housing and education, to food security, employment, transportation, and public safety. So the variety at a very broad view. And there were also 13 agencies that we easily identified that you could grab information based upon the demographic that they serve. So taking both the subject matter and also agencies who deal in that area, there were 3 approaches that we thought about if the board was interested in doing an assessment like this. The first would be, and it came up in the discussion with the Chamber of Commerce tonight, the potential to have the JCC Center for Community Studies do another survey, St. Lawrence County specific. That's possible with survey questions that we put together. It's also possible in another approach to have staff or interns make phone calls to the agencies that I mentioned, among others, to gather information from at least the demographics that we know they serve. And the third approach, which also I think was mentioned in broad terms during the chamber discussion, was some type of survey, either of the public or even of county employees who serve a wide variety of demographics in the county, to gather information about assessment of need and bring that back to the board. So I think the questions that we were left with after our discussion was how will we use this data when we get it? And if the board would like to do this assessment. Legislator Denisha, does that cover what you were expecting out of our discussion?
Yes, it was, Ruth. It was exactly what we had talked about, and yeah, I think you've hit it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Anyone else like to make a comment or discussion of the three choices, or if we need to do this at all? No. Mr. Burke. You're mute, John, you're muted.
Thank you, Ruth, for taking the time to discuss that. You know, I think what Brooke told us was helpful, but I think when you boil it down, and I think she said this several times, it's anecdotal. Now, her anecdotal assessment is certainly much better than my assessment because she's out there talking to businesses. And I think, you know, they probably could give us maybe a refined assessment of how our businesses are doing. But of equal concern are the individuals, our residents, and how well they're doing. I'm not particularly wedded to any of the three approaches, Ruth. I mean, I think that it would be good to have a little better assessment of what our residents of the county are enduring. And I don't think that, you know, I think that a lack of information is a detriment to any plan that might be needed. So again, I think any of the three approaches, I probably would be a little more preferential to the one where we use our own interns or students or whatever, Ruth, because I think you have better control of what's being asked.
Anyone else? Okay, I remember the JCC study. I thought that was pretty interesting. Being from somebody from the outside, I'd be a little concerned about having our staff do it as another responsibility. You know, it may be difficult, John, with JCC being, we're into the summer now and we don't know about the reopening. I just will say one thing, we're not seeing it yet, but it's kind of like a wave coming in, and I think it's going to be your dairy farmers. They've already been dumping milk. They are getting paid for it, but it'll be a reduced rate, probably $2 to $3 per hundredweight. Fortunately, it's actually been a nice spring, so that people have been able to get onto the land and do their work rather efficiently. But what's been happening is all your farmers have basically anywhere from 6% to 15% have been asked to reduce their production. And if they don't, they will be getting $4 to $5 per hundredweight less. And at the current prices that they're getting right now, most of them are breaking even or not. So I think you may see a lot of stress. You will be seeing a lot of stress in the dairy farm community. Those that are small producers of homegrown beef and meats and other meats like that, I think they're doing well. People are buying locally. They're trying to, you know, Tri-Town is busy. Mr. Arquette. You're muted, Tony. Yep.
I didn't mean to in any way cut you off. I just raised my hand. I wanted to be the next.
So,
Seem to be
go ahead. Go ahead, Tony.
I was just going to say that yeah, and there's no doubt that farmers are struggling, many as are many public and private sector citizens across the county. I'm with John. I think the more information we can gather to try to gain a snapshot of where the detriment is the only way we're going to be able to help the people that are in the most need right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Mrs. Haggard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brooke touched on something else which would definitely impact the Canton and Potsdam, and that is if the college kids don't come back, I don't know how the businesses downtown in Potsdam are going to be able to survive. So if we knew how they were doing now and could foresee how long it was going to take before, my understanding from talking to people is they've had trouble getting the PPP. And so be interested to know, but if the college kids don't come back to campus in the fall, it's going to be, I think, really very scary for the Potsdam, probably Canton communities.
Thank you, Mrs. Haggard. Anyone else? Okay, seeing no more comments, a lot to think about. We'll move on to committee reports. Our first up is Cornell Cooperative Extension Board, Mr. Denisha.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our last meeting for the cooperative extension was April 21st, which was held via Zoom. Our next meeting is scheduled for, I believe, the 26th of May, which again will be Zoom. I think one of the notable things that the extension farm has been selected by Ag and Markets. They were selected as a regional distribution site for face masks and hand sanitizer intended for farm operations. And they had, the Canton Farm had received 7,000 masks, and we're on the scheduled to get thousands of gallons of hand sanitizer and some 2-ounce pump containers. And Patrick has, it's almost all gone. So it was a big thing. Took a lot of cooperation, but good thing for our farmers. That's all I have.
Has it been canceled?
What's that?
4-H camp has they decided to cancel 4-H camp?
Okay, I didn't hear that. Everybody just kind of went mute there for a while.
Okay.
Yes, 4-H camp has been canceled. We didn't have a meeting. Patrick sent out an email to the board, and there's no way, given the guidelines that we were going to be, the guidelines that we were going to have to comply with, there was no way that we were going to be able to accomplish it.
Okay, I'm sorry to hear that. Fish and Wildlife Management Board, Mrs. Curran.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can. You're in the dark.
Yeah, well, you're either downstairs or upstairs where the lights are off due to construction. So there has been no additional meeting, and we don't have one on the books yet.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Curran. Fisheries Advisory Board, Ms. Terminelli.
No meeting and nothing to report.
Thank you. Mr. Leader, Governor Fair Board.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's been no additional meetings since my last report to the board.
And I have to ask, any reports about cancellation of the fair?
I've heard nothing as of now.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Leader. Highway and Solid Waste Committee, Mr. Denisha.
Nothing to report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Denisha. The IDA, Mr. Reagan.
The IDA has not met. The Patrick Kelly, the executive director, is serving as the chair of the reopening committee. He and his staff have been working very closely with the other economic development agencies to assist businesses. And I think that's been reported on extensively. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Mr. Reagan. Recreational Trails Advisory Board, Mr. Arquette.
Thanks, Kevin. The board hasn't met for obvious reasons, but Joel Lapierre, who's the chairman, the new chairman of the Recreational Trails Advisory Board, just reached out to the committee members today in pursuit of ideas to reconvene in some fashion, whether virtual or otherwise. And then I spoke here to the fact that the trails opened on Saturday, a tremendous showing, and what a great opportunity in these very trying times to, for the most part, what I saw, everybody practicing social distance, still getting out in the fresh air, spending money and enjoy spending money. Many businesses really appreciating the burst there Saturday and Sunday, a couple nice days. So we've got a little struggle in one section of the trail due to the pandemic and the process and getting a section open, but we're working through that as well. So for the most part, one of the brighter spots, I think, right now in county government. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arquette. That's great news. The RVRDA, Mr. Forsyth.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I keep bouncing in and out. Okay. The deadline for the community development grant applications was May 15th. And there were 12 applications for a total of 218,000 in requests. And there's 100,000. They haven't been reviewed yet, but there's 100,000 to dole out. So hopefully you can hear me.
Thank you, Mr. Forsyth. St. Lawrence County Chamber of Commerce, Nancy Arquette. Ms. Arquette.
I have nothing new to report today.
Okay. Thank you very much. Soil and Water Conservation District Board of Directors, Mr. Burke.
Soil and Water doesn't meet in April. Our next meeting is this Thursday night, and we'll have a report for next month.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Burke. Okay. Mrs. Haggard, would you like to report on your committee?
Would I like to report on anything?
On your committee that you've been assigned to.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you said, Mr. Chairman.
No, Mr. Lightfoot will be assigning you to several committees here as an orientation, I think.
I do know something about the previous legislators committee that he was on, and I know they had no meeting because I checked with him.
Okay, and that still remains to be true then, right? Okay.
As far as I know, I'll have to get back to you. I'll be in touch with him soon.
All right, thank you. Now's the time for old and new business. Anybody have any old or new business? Okay, everybody looks like they got fresh haircuts except for Mr. Reagan. Okay. We do have a need for executive session for all four categories.
No appointments, all other three.
Okay, no appointments, but we do have a need for negotiations, litigation, and personnel. I would entertain a motion to go into executive session by Mr. Denise, seconded by Mr. Fay and Mr. Forsyth. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, so we are in executive.